contemporary story, which makes it different than all the other parts. This is different. It can be tough. What happened that day where you had almost 3,000 people murdered? So how do you change that? I mean, if you're here and you're talking about what happened that day, it's about terrorists taking over planes. This plan, by the way, it was brilliant. That's the FBI's words, not mine. It was brilliant. It was evil, but it's brilliant. I mean, never before had anyone come up with an idea of taking over planes to the point where you kill the pilots and you put your own pilot in that seat to fly that plane loaded with thousands and thousands of gallons of jet fuel as a bomb to fly into buildings to murder. That's the plan. Is that a horrible plan? We're going to take over planes. We're going to kill anyone that gets in our way on these planes. And then we're going to take that plane and we're going to fly it into a building to murder. That's the story. The story of Flight 93, the essence of this story is that 40 brave passengers and crew members got up out of their seats that day and decided to fight evil. And because they got up out of their seats and were physically fighting with the terrorists, this plane does not reach Washington, D.C. This is the only plane that day that does not crash into a building and murder people on the ground. Now, we lost the 40 here, but it could have been much worse. Could have been much worse. If this plane would have made it to Washington, D.C., hit the Capitol or the White House, you would have had more than almost 3,000 people die. So we remember them. We honor them. And I use a quote by Albert Einstein, that Albert Einstein said this. He said, "The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing." And on Flight 93, think about it. They could have sat in the back of the plane, could have just sat there and done nothing. Evil would have ran its course, maybe hit that target in Washington, D.C. But in the back of the plane, they vote to fight, they get up out of their seats, and they fight with the terrorists, and in the fight to regain control of the plane. Not to crash the plane here. Sometimes visitors come here and think that the passengers picked this spot. No, they're not thinking to die. They're thinking to live. They want to regain control of the plane. They want to pull those terrorists out of those seats. They want to try to land this plane somewhere to live, not to die. And thank God that it hit here and didn't hit a building or a town or somewhere in Washington, D.C. So in that sense, we're lucky. We're lucky. And we thank the passengers and crew of Flight 93. I'm going to talk about eyewitnesses who saw this plane. And you're not going to see anything that I'm going to talk about up in that visitor center. So what I'm going to share with you are things that are not in that visitor center. Now, I don't expect you to go up in that visitor center and read every exhibit. I've read multiple books. I've talked to multiple people here. I've talked to eyewitnesses. So I take a little different spin on it. I tell the story, but I'm going to tell the story through eyewitnesses of people that saw the plane. Now, we get visitors here, and a lot of the visitors claim that they saw this plane. Maybe they saw it, maybe they didn't. I'm not going to burst anyone's bubble and say that you didn't see this plane. I don't know, maybe you did. But we know where the plane flew. I mean, we know that. We know that when the terrorists took over the plane ended up south of Cleveland. Anyone here from Cleveland? If you're from Cleveland, you may have seen this plane. Then it flew over Canton, Ohio. Anyone here from Canton, Ohio? Known for the
Football Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much, the Football Hall of Fame. So if you lived in Canton, you may have seen this plane. But remember, there's 4,500 planes in the sky. And they're all those pilots are being told to make sure the cockpit door is locked and bring that plane down right now. So there's planes everywhere, places that they should not have been that day, and a lot of people see these planes. But like I said, if you're south of Cleveland, if you live in Canton, if you live south of the Pittsburgh airport, if you live in Greensburg, anyone here know where Greensburg is? Not far from here. Ligonier, the plane, we know the route. We know the route of this plane. What I'm about to tell you, it's not a fact that what these eyewitnesses said is true. Okay? But it's a fact that they said it. You see the difference? So everything I'm telling you, it's a fact they said this. And you can believe what you want or not. Some of these stories are actually in the 9/11 Commission report. So these are documented. They're in different books. But again, they're eyewitnesses. And okay, maybe they don't get it right. Maybe they get it perfect too. So here's what happened that day. Most people remember where they were. You're old enough to remember that day. You'll remember that. But I'm going to tell you this. On that morning, and I'm going to say I'm one of these that morning, I didn't get up and watch television. I didn't listen to a radio on my way to work. Even today, you know something happened today? My dog got me up at 4 a.m. every day. I get up, I feed my dog, I shave, I shower, I go back to sleep. And then I get up and put my uniform on and I come to work. I didn't turn the television on. And on my way to work, I listen to music, but I'm not listening to news. So I could show up at work not knowing if something happened overnight on my way here. On that day, the stories that I'm going to tell you, these people who didn't watch television in the morning, they weren't listening to a radio, and then all of a sudden they see a plane in the sky. So here's where we begin. Ligonier Valley School, not far from here. The terrorists have already taken over the plane. When the terrorists take over the plane, they shut off the transponder. Does anyone here know what the transponder does on a plane? It's a tracking device. That's how the air traffic controllers know where those 4,500 planes are. You got to know where they are. You just can't let them fly up in the sky. They're going to hit into one another. I mean, people could get killed. You got to know where they are. That's why there's a tracking device. The terrorists do not want you to know where they are. They shut it off. So anyone that was watching United 93 that day, all of a sudden that little green dot on a screen, it disappears. It's gone. Where did it go? Where did it go? They don't want you to know where they are because they know that jets, U.S. jets could come after them. They don't want you to know where they are. They bring the plane down low to the ground. You ever hear the saying, fly below the radar? You don't want people to know what you're doing, where you are. They don't want you to know where they are, what they're doing. So the plane is low. We'll start with that. The plane is low to the ground. How low to the ground? Well, on that plane, when they took over that plane, the pilots may have been murdered. They were seen by Todd Beamer being dragged out of the cockpit. You all know Todd Beamer's name, right? What he said? What did he say?
Let's roll.
Right. You know, sometimes visitors get angry if we don't talk about Todd Beamer here. You didn't talk about Todd Beamer. He's the one who said, let's roll. Well, that's true. He said that, and that's how we know what I'm going to tell you next. Todd Beamer's on a phone. He's talking to a Verizon Airphone operator. At first, he wanted to talk to his wife, and then he decides he doesn't want to talk to his wife. He doesn't want to get her upset. She's pregnant. So he decides, I don't want to talk to her. So he's talking to this operator. And in talking to this operator, he tells the operator that he just witnessed the pilots being dragged out of the cockpit. Now they're lying on the floor in first class. He says incapacitated, possibly dead. How many of you have flown on a plane? Put your hands up. Keep your hands up if you were in first class. I hear it's quite lovely. I've never flown first class. I don't know anything about first class. Only thing I know about first class is from watching Seinfeld, the comedian. One time he got bumped to first class and Elaine got stuck in coach and there's a guy sleeping on her. So it's lovely. Not on this thing. Guess who's in first class? All the terrorists. All the terrorists on these 4 planes are sitting in first class. There's 4 terrorists sitting on Flight 93 in first class. There's 10 people sitting in first class, and 4 of them are the terrorists. They got you surrounded. Terrorist pilots in the first row, right in front of the door. 2 terrorists are halfway back in the 3rd row, and you got a 4th terrorist in the 6th row. They take over this plane. They shut off that transponder. They put the plane on autopilot. The plane is flying itself. That's how we know it's on its way to Washington, D.C. After that, we don't know. It's either the Capitol or the White House, but don't let anyone tell you it's definitely the Capitol, and don't anyone tell you it's definitely the White House. It's one of the two. And we know it's on its way to Washington, D.C. because the plane is flying itself to the Reagan National Airport. Those terrorists pushed everyone to the back of the plane. When the plane was taken over, the pilots were possibly murdered. You had a passenger in 5B sitting in front of one of the terrorists, instantly murdered. Don't know why. Did he get up to try to help the pilot? I don't know. We don't know everything about this story, but I can tell you the facts. I'm telling you right now, it's a fact that Mark Rothenberg was murdered in first class. He's sitting in 5B. It's a fact that those two pilots are lying on the floor, according to Todd Beamer. Are they dead or alive? Don't know. It's also a fact that when the terrorists took over the plane, a flight attendant ends up in the cockpit, and the terrorists execute her. I use the word execute because she pleaded for her life. They could have let her go. They did. They decided it's going to kill her. So they killed her. The terrorist pilot, Ziad Jarrah, he gets on the intercom, and he's talking to everyone pushed to the back of the plane. And here's what he says. This is the pilot. Our demands have been met. We are turning the plane around. We are heading back to the airport, which would be Newark. So stay in your seats, and no one will be harmed. You believe that? It's a lie. I head back to Newark. And you know what? What demands? Demands? These are murderers. These are terrorists. Hijackers have demands. Hijackers want to go to another country. Maybe hijackers want money. Maybe hijackers want prisoners released. Maybe hijackers want to make a statement to the world. They have no demands. They want you to sit in the back of the plane because they know if those 40 people get up out of their seats and fight back, the terrorists are going to lose. You think 4 can beat 40? Absolutely not. Yeah, the terrorists have knives. We found 14 knives in this field right here. I'm telling you right now, the terrorists did not carry 14 knives. Anyone could carry a knife on a plane back then. Isn't that a ridiculous rule? As long as the knife were less than 4 inches. Terrorists knew that. That's why in some of the planes they had box cutter knives. No box cutter knives on this plane. Regular knives. 14 knives found in this field. I guarantee those 14 knives didn't all belong to the terrorists. The terrorists have a plan B. Plan A is that they take this plane, they fly it to Washington, D.C., they hit either the Capitol or the White House to murder. Plan B. If the passengers get up out of their seats and they're fighting with us, we know we're going to lose. We will hold out as long as we can, but if we feel they're going to regain control of the plane, we're going to take that plane, we're going to crash it into the ground and murder everyone on board. And that's what happened here. They don't want that to happen. That's why they're trying to trick you. They want you to think you're going back to Newark. And the plan, you know what, that might have worked. That the terrorists made a mistake. In the back of the plane, they started making phone calls. Not necessarily on the cell phone. Back then, you had to be below 500 feet for this to work. It's different now. These are different now. Oh, what we would have learned if this type of phone were available back then. Texting, not available to the public. Video, audio, Facebook, all sorts of ways that they could have put images of what was going on the plane known to the world. Not available. So in the back of the plane, they're using the phones attached to the back of the seats. And they're calling. They're freely calling from the back of the plane their loved ones. The terrorists, all 4 of them, are up front, not watching them. Well, guess what? As soon as they make a phone call, they're going to know they're lying. Because as soon as they make a phone call, they're going to find out from their loved ones what's going on in America. There are planes flying into buildings. The World Trade Center's been hit. The Pentagon has been hit. They're saying on television that these are terrorists. They're saying on television that Osama bin Laden is behind all of this. You know the term, the jig is up? The jig is up. They know they're lying. And in the back of the plane, they vote to fight. They vote to fight. So this plane, when they took over the plane, it crossed into Ohio. It flew south of Ohio. It flew over Canton, Ohio. It flies over Greensburg. When it flew over Ligonier, not far from here, this is what the eyewitnesses saw. These eyewitnesses are boys and girls and their teachers from Ligonier Valley School. They're outside for recess. They look up in the sky. There's a plane. Oh my God, why is there a plane right above our school? Why is that plane so low to the ground? Those boys and girls and teachers, some of them said this. The plane was so low to the ground that when we looked up and we saw that plane fly overhead, we could see the windows of that plane, and we could see people in those windows looking down at us as they flew over our school. Ever see a plane that low? Have to be pretty low to see the windows and to see people in the windows. I've never seen a plane that low, maybe at an airport, right? Coming in for a landing. If that's what they said they saw, and you can believe that or not. It's a fact that they said that. It's not a fact that the plane was so low that you could see people in the window. Then the plane crossed Route 30. When you came here today, did any of you pass the Stoystown Auto Wreckers? How can you miss that? Thousands and thousands of junk cars. An eyewitness at that junkyard by the name of Terry Butler. You can YouTube him if you like. Tells his story. Terry Butler is pulling a radiator out of one of those cars. He looks up in the sky because he hears something really loud. And he wasn't watching television, nor were those boys and girls at Ligonier. All of a sudden there's a plane. It's flying low. And Terry Butler said, this is what the plane was doing. The wings are banking left and right. It's doing this. It's rocking. The front of the plane is doing this. We call it porpoising or dolphining. Why is it doing that? Because there's a fight on that plane. The men and women are storming the cockpit. The terrorist pilot is trying to knock them off balance by banking left and right. So when Terry Butler sees the plane, the fight's on. They're trying to get into the cockpit. The terrorist pilot's trying to knock him off balance. So then he hears the crash. He would have heard a crash. If you drove from where that junkyard is to here in a car, 10 minutes maybe, a plane, a jet like this at 563 miles an hour, let me explain to you how fast that is. 3 football fields, 300 yards in a second. 1001. Plane just flew over 3 football fields. So it's not going to be long once he sees that plane that he's going to hear that plane. And he just realized that everyone just died. Those people, that plane, I don't know why it's doing what it's doing, but those poor people just died. He leaves that radiator. He goes home, puts his television on, and now he's enlightened. He knows what's going on. We have built this memorial to remember the passengers and crew of Flight 93 and everyone that day that died and was in harm's way. You know how Terry Butler remembers and honors the passengers and crew of Flight 93? He has tattooed both his arms with every name of every person on this plane.
Oh my.
You can YouTube him. All their names on his arm. Great guy, still works over there. So that plane now, before it crashed, is coming this direction. Where the visitor center is, it's coming right over that hillside. How many of you were up there today? Black granite walkway, what is it? What does it represent?
Flight
Path of the plane. Shadow of the flight path of the plane. So when you're walking this direction, if you walk to the end, you'd be up right there where those people are on that overlook. That lines up with that white wall. There's a boulder out here in the field that marks where the plane came down. The plane's coming in that direction. What's here back then? No strip mine, not anymore. But the mining company had leased a portion of the land up there where the parking lot is today to a junkyard, a scrap company, Rollock. They're up there. There's 12 men right up where that parking lot is, working among the junk. I remember Pepsi Cola vending machines. You know the logo for Pepsi Cola? I remember all these machines just piled up, junk machines there and other stuff. But I remember distinctly that logo. There's 12 men up there. 2 of those fellas, they moved to high ground. They're up a little higher. They're up here. They have a radio. They turn the radio on. They're taking a break. Oh, let's take a break. Let's turn the radio on. Turn the radio on. It's around 10 o'clock. Plane's going to crash at 10:03. Turn their radio on around 10 o'clock. Guess what? When they turn the radio on, guess what they find out? They find out that the Pentagon's been hit. They find out that the World Trade Center's been hit. They find out that there's terrorists and Osama bin Laden is behind this. According to their eyewitness testimony, Roger Sarver, the owner of the radio, said that when he turned that radio on and found out what was going on, he looked in the distance and he sees a plane. Right at the moment they found out. That same plane that just flew over Ligonier Valley, that same plane that just crossed Route 30 that Terry Butler saw. Now Roger Sarver and the fellow with him, they said at this point, the plane was no longer doing this. It was no longer doing this. It was completely upside down. It's upside down now. In the fight, the plane flips upside down. When that plane flipped upside down, the fight's over because the terrorists are locked into those seats. They're strapped in. The passengers and crew who are up out of their seats, they're helter-skelter through that plane. So that plane is flying in this direction. And they're horrified. They're watching it come in. They said it was so low, they thought it was going to crash into the scrapyard up there where all those Pepsi Cola vending machines are stacked up. There's a man there by the name of Lee Purble. He's also in the 9/11 Commission report. He's working that day. It's his first day on the job. He has a welder's mask on. You know what that is. He has a blowtorch. So he's cutting into metal. He's not looking to the sky. All of a sudden he hears something really loud. So he looks up, he flips his mask off, and he said the plane was right above his head. He said the plane was so low to the ground, when it flew over his head, he looked up and he could see the reflection of the ground below like a mirror as that plane flew over his head. Is it a fact that the plane was so low that you could see the reflection of the ground? No. It's a fact that Lee Purble said that. But then he went further to say, he said the plane was anywhere from 30, 40, 50 feet above his head. That puts it the height of that wall up there. So if you look up there and you imagine a big jet upside down flying over that hilltop, and Lee Purble looked up, then he would have heard it crash. A boulder out here in the field marks where the plane came down. Anyone want to guess what's on the other side of these trees? Shanksville School. Elementary, middle school, high school. Those boys and girls didn't see the plane like the boys and girls at Ligonier Valley and their teachers. They heard it. They heard the explosion. Their whole building shook. Ceiling tiles fell from the ceilings and hit desk of the children in the school. One little girl screamed that a bomb had just gone off. There's terror. They're scared. The janitor goes outside and looks in this direction and sees this huge black cloud of smoke up in the sky. When the plane hit, I know this is no consolation to the families. They would have felt nothing. You just hit the ground at 563 miles an hour. 7,000 gallons of jet fuel. Feel like closing your eyes. In that direction, if we went 8 miles that way, 8 miles that way, people in New Baltimore, eyewitnesses, are picking up paper in their yard. There's brochures that they put on the back of the seats. U.S. mail that's on this plane, 8 miles that way. There's a barn right here. Over the roof of that barn in that direction is Indian Lake. It's a resort. An eyewitness there said when they heard the explosion, then all of a sudden it was raining confetti from the sky. All these little particles coming down. Inside this wall, inside this chain link fence, there's 40 acres that we protect. Because they only recovered 8% of the remains. That means that 92% are missing. Where? I had a forensic anthropologist on my tour the other day. She was here that day, one of the ones trying to identify remains. I used the word vaporized. She liked that. She said, you know, you're right. Vaporized. A human body, what, 70, 80 some percent water? You got an explosion, you have a lot of heat. Fragmented, vaporized. The 8% that they found, and I'm telling you 92% is missing, I don't know where. Somewhere in these 40 acres. the 8% that they found, by using medical records, dental records, tattoos, fingerprints, and thank God for DNA, they were able to identify every single person on the plane, including the terrorists whose families did not provide any DNA. And how did we figure that out? Well, once you identified 40, you got 4 samples left. You should call them A, B, C, and D. I don't know Ahmad from Ahmed to Ziad to Saeed, but those are the terrorists. The remains of the passengers and crew were given back to the families. The remains identified. There's a sign by that junkyard, by that scrapyard of cars. Tell me what's wrong with the sign. We will always remember and pray for Flight 93, all American-born heroes. What's wrong with that sign? They're not all American. They're not all American-born. You had Toshio Kuge from Japan. You had Christian Adams from Germany. You had Waleska Martinez from Puerto Rico. You had Alan Bevan from New Zealand. When the World Trade Centers were hit, there were 80-some different countries that had office space in the World Trade Centers. You had people from all over the world murdered that day. So the remains identified were given back to the families. The remains of the terrorists identified, given to the FBI. The FBI to this day have those remains in Washington, D.C. as the worst crime, evidence for the worst crime in the history of the United States. Why do I say that? You had almost 3,000 people murdered. So let me end with this. I got 1 minute. Don't tell my boss if I go over. Tomorrow is promised to no one. You believe it? If you don't believe it, go up to the visitor center. Stand in the back of the visitor center where there are almost 3,000 names of everyone that died. Believe me, when they got up that morning, they washed their face, brushed their teeth, went up an elevator to the World Trade Center, boarded a plane, like a group of boys and girls in Washington, D.C., traveling with their teachers on their way to Disneyland because they won a contest through National Geographic. Died that day. It's their last day on Earth. So tomorrow is promised to no one. So what's important, my friends? Think about it.
Right
What's
now.
important? Your friends? Your family? I find it disgraceful when people won't stand for the flag. You know, my father almost died fighting for that flag. He's a Marine. Other people have died defending this country. If you don't believe in the flag, at least stand up for the people that do believe in the flag. And if you believe in God, I'm not saying you have to, and I'm not saying what God that is. Think about that one. So, live a good life. Be kind to one another. It costs nothing to be kind. Take advantage of being with your family today, your friends. You're enjoying a beautiful sunny day. Guess what? There's 40 people here that will never feel that sunny day ever again. So, thank you for listening. God bless you. And have a beautiful day. My name's Gregory Zavarov.
Thank you.
Flip-flops, you actually have the proper shoes on.
Various sizes.
Right.
There are 40. There are 40 amazing passengers and crew members, different personalities represented by the different sizes of the notches and facets of the and the strength of them. And this gate is made of hemlock timbers.
Wow.
So
It weighs a ton.
this is one of my favorite parts of the memorial because it actually tells the whole story of Flight 93 within this gate.
And where were these timbers from? Local barns?
These are hemlock timbers, but I can't tell you exactly
Okay.
where they came from. They were not from the trees here.
Right.
The burned hemlock trees, after the investigation, after the crater that you probably heard of was dug up and excavated, it went down 40 feet deep. They went out 85 feet in both directions. at the front of the plane was 30 feet down. The two black boxes were at 25 and 15 feet, both totally intact with all of the information on it. So we have the whole transcript of the cockpit voice recording that is on our website if you're interested in reading what was said in that cockpit for that 30 minutes. Then the burned hemlock trees, we hired arborists to climb them and very, very meticulously pick out every single thing they found in the burned hemlock trees. And then those burned hemlocks were cut down, ground into mulch. After the excavation was completed and everything was gotten out of the ground, it was backfilled, ground over it, and then the mulch from the burned hemlock trees laid over that area. So even the burned hemlock trees never left this site. The plane, and when you're in the visitor center, you see the tiny fragments of the plane. The largest piece of the plane is about the size of the hood of a very small compact car. So it has about 2 windows and then parts of 2 other windows. And you know on a plane how close together those windows are. So it's about 6 by 7 feet or something like that. The part of a wheel, the 2 engines, but other than that, everything else is pretty much smaller than a dinner plate. Very few items, pieces of the plane much bigger than that. But we still managed to recover 95 to 97% of the plane. The plane then was, debris was taken to a storage place up in New England for a number of years, until about, I think it's maybe 4 years ago now. And then all our superintendent, our curator, some family members, and some various other people with hazmat suits on their hands and knees went over every speck of that debris from the plane to make sure that nothing was ever left accidentally on that. Once that was all taken care of, then the plane debris was loaded into 4 container cars and escorted down here from New England, and all of the plane wreckage is buried within our debris field behind the trees. So even all of the plane is here now.